Mr. Speaker, honorable members, fellow Kenyans, today I present to the country the highlights of the budget for the financial year 2019-2020. I do this in performing my fiduciary responsibility as the guardian of the nation's finances and in fulfillment of the requirement of Section 40 of the Public Financial Management Act 2012 and the Standing Order number 241 of the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency the President, Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta, has on several occasions, including most recently during the 2019 State of the Nation address, set out an ambitious socio-economic development agenda that speaks to the Kenya we want. This has been captured under the Big Four agenda, which lays out key initiatives that will put Kenya on a bold new path of rapid and shared economic growth, job creation at an unprecedented pace, and reduced poverty on a sustained basis. Mr. Speaker, the budget for 2019-2020 lays a strong foundation for achieving the President's Big Four agenda, while at the same time addressing the following challenges facing our economy. One, creating an enabling environment for businesses, and in particular for the micro, small, medium enterprises in order to accelerate the growth of our economy and create more jobs for our youth. Two, the need to be prudent and efficient in our spending. Three, the need to mobilize domestic resources to fund priority projects and programs. Four, the need to reduce our fiscal deficits in order to stabilize and reduce our debt. And five, the need to implement reforms that will enhance our efficiency and make us competitive. Before addressing these issues, allow me, Mr. Speaker, to say a few words on the recent economic development and outlook. Mr. Speaker, our economy continues to be resilient in the midst of significant global and domestic headwinds. In 2018, our economy grew by 6.3%, up from 4.9% in the previous year. The growth is the highest to have been recorded for the past 8 years, and well above the sub-Saharan African regional average growth of 3% and global average of 3.6%, reinforcing the advantages of a diversified and reforming economy. This strong growth was attained despite the rising global trade friction among major trading partners, as well as uncertainties from Brexit and renewed geopolitical risks. Mr. Speaker, we project growth in 2019 to remain strong at around the same level as in 2018. While there are risks associated with delayed long rains, which may impact negatively on agriculture, we expect such risks to be offset by continued strong performance in non-agricultural activities such as tourism and construction. Over the medium term, we expect growth of over 7% as programmed activities under the Big Four agenda gain traction. Mr. Speaker, the risks to this outlook include an escalation of global trade relations tension, a rise in oil prices, and weather-related shocks. Should these risks materialize, Kenya's growth forecast could be constrained. However, the government will take appropriate measures to mitigate any negative impact on growth. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to how we are going to address the challenges facing us. Mr. Speaker, the theme of this year's budget is creating jobs, transforming lives, harnessing the Big Four plan. This theme resonates with our strategies towards a stronger economy that will generate more employment opportunities and provide better livelihood for Kenyans. In this budget, therefore, we are laying a firm foundation for accelerated growth and shared prosperity. Mr. Speaker, in order to achieve rapid and inclusive economic growth and expand job opportunities for the youth, we must continue to improve the business climate in order for our business sector to thrive. Therefore, we must continue to implement prudent fiscal and monetary policies in order to achieve the low rate of inflation, low but sustainable interest rate, and a competitive exchange rate. In addition, we will continue with our ambitious business reform initiative in order to reduce the cost of doing business and encourage private sector innovation and entrepreneurship. Our current ranking of 61 out of 180 countries in the World Bank doing business indicators is not only the best ranking we have had so far, but it's also an indication of our resolve to improve our business climate and become a top investment destination. Our aim in the next few years is to be among the top 50 nations in the world by continuing to strengthen our reform agenda. Mr. Speaker, last year I amended the Income Tax Act to provide for a deduction of 30% of the total electricity by manufacturers as a rebate subject to the conditions to be set by Ministry of Energy. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Energy, in consultation with the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Cooperative Development, has now developed the framework that will be used so that manufacturers can enjoy this incentive. We expect these incentives to reduce the cost of electricity to manufacturers by about 20% and to make our products competitive in the region. And this should spur economic growth and create employment for our youth. Mr. Speaker, the large accumulation of VAT refunds in KRA arising from VAT on zero-rated supplies has impacted negatively on the cash flow and liquidity of our manufacturers and the business community at large. In order to fast-track the return of these funds to the rightful owners, I have constituted a team at the National Treasury to quickly validate the outstanding refunds with a view to clear them within the next 2 months. Mr. Speaker, in addition, there has been a large accumulation of VAT refunds at KRA, which emanates from the 6% VAT withholding tax. We are currently working on the modalities for settling this obligation, and I intend to engage the business community immediately in order to come up with a workable solution. Going forward, we intend to lower the VAT withholding tax to a level that will eliminate the need for KRA to make refunds. I'll be making proposals to lower the VAT withholding rate under the tax proposal later in this statement. Mr. Speaker, on the pending bills, we have reviewed existing pending bills as directed by His Excellency the President during this year's Madaraka Day celebrations. In addition to the payments we have made so far, we have prioritized 10.9 billion Kenya shillings of the verified pending bills, which will be paid before the end of this month. This should eliminate most pending bills owed to the youth, women and persons living with disability under the access to the government procurement opportunity. The clearance of this backlog should improve liquidity to our suppliers and contractors and thereby boost our economy. Mr. Speaker, our micro, small and medium enterprises plays a critical role in wealth and employment creation. We have listened carefully to their concerns, which include limited access to credit, entrepreneurial skills and markets, as well as cumbersome regulatory and working environment. Mr. Speaker, to facilitate faster clearance of cargo, His Excellency the President in May 2019 directed the Ministry of Interior and Coordination in collaboration with other government agencies to ensure all imports and export consolidators undergo strict vetting, registration and gazettement before they are allowed to operate at all the ports of entry and clearance. This will reduce delays in cargo clearance into the country for most small cargo importers operating under the consolidators, reduce tax evasion, curb illegal importation of contraband and counterfeit goods, and reduce delay in cargo clearance into the country. Mr. Speaker, the government has been supporting micro, small and medium enterprises through various affirmative action funds, including the WESO Fund, Youth Enterprise Development Fund, and Women Enterprise Development Fund. To increase efficiency and eliminate overlaps, I have consolidated the three funds into one to be known as Biashara Kenya Fund. The fund will give special priority to businesses owned by youth, women, and people living in disabilities. The regulations establishing the new fund have been published after being subjected to stakeholders' consultation, and I will be submitting them to this House today. Mr. Speaker, to further improve access to credit to SMEs, last month we endorsed a mobile loan product known as Stawi Loan, which offers unsecured loans to small enterprises. Mr. Speaker, the government, through the Ministry of Information, Communication and Telecommunication and Technology, in partnership with academia, civil society and private sector, has set up a program known as Ajira Digital Program, whose aim is to bridge the gap between skills available and skills demand. A major objective of the program is to enable over 1 million youth annually to be engaged as digital freelance workers. In order to provide stability for the youth engaged in this program, the government has proposed that the youth registered in the program pay a registration fee of 10,000 for the next 3 years in lieu of income tax with effect from January 2020. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I propose to amend the income tax in order to exempt registered members from the regular taxation for a specified period. Mr. Speaker, this registration fee will be paid to the Ajira Fund, through which the youth-oriented program will be financed for the benefit of our young people who need to be engaged in tangible programs. In this regard, a framework for the registration of the Ajira members, the modalities of collecting the fee, as well as the structure for the utilization of the fund will be put in place. Mr. Speaker, this fund that will promote growth of local businesses that generate digital and digitally enabled jobs. In this respect, I have set aside 1 billion Kenya shillings as seed capital for the fund. I encourage the youth and women to take advantage of this funding window to establish and grow their business. Mr. Speaker, in order to take full advantage of the preference and reservations in the Procurement Act and to promote local industries through the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya initiative, we are in the process of developing a catalogue of items that are locally manufactured, assembled, mined, or grown in Kenya, and which will be given priority in public procurement. Accordingly, no tax exemptions will be provided for any items on the catalogues. In this respect, Mr. Speaker, with effects from 1st July 2019, all ministries, departments, agencies, and other public entities are required to give exclusive preference in procurement of motor vehicles and motorcycles from farms that have assembly plants in Kenya. This will go a long way in inspiring the growth of local auxiliary industries and enterprise and create employment opportunities to the youth. Mr. Speaker, we have received numerous complaints relating to the late payment and even non-payment of suppliers by businesses and contractors who enjoy relatively superior bargaining position. The most affected are small and medium enterprises. To address this situation, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed amendments to the Competition Act to empower the Competition Authority to deal with abuse of buyer power and ensure prompt payment to suppliers. The proposed amendment shall also provide for penalties for infringement of these provisions. Further, Mr. Speaker, going forward, the National Treasury will endeavor to ensure that payments to suppliers of goods and services to the national government are made within a maximum of 60 days. This, Mr. Speaker, will support our MSMEs and the business community. I expect all the 47 county government to take cue from this and ensure prompt payment for all supplies delivered to their respective counties. Mr. Speaker, government will streamline the process of pre-verification of conformity, PVOC, so that our business communities stop suffering demurrage charges and other costs while clearing their goods at the port of entry. This has been caused by additional inspection of imports by the Kenya Bureau of Standards and a host of other agencies. Mr. Speaker, to address this challenge, it has been decided that once the pre-verification of conformity has been done at the point of export and information relayed to our customs and standards teams, the same goods should not be subjected to further inspection unless there is a prior intelligence on non-compliance. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the logistics at the port and at the inland container depot will be streamlined to have customs and essential standards team only. Mr. Speaker, turning to expenditures, we must ensure that our scarce resources are used in most efficient and effective manner. Accordingly, since the start of this financial year, government has implemented new initiatives to contain growth of expenditure. First, we adopted a zero-based budgeting process to weed out non-priority expenditures from the budget. Second, we have adopted a policy of no new projects to ensure that government completes ongoing projects. Third, we are reviewing the portfolio of externally funded projects with a view to restructuring and realigning them with the Big Four plan. And fourth, we are taking measures to reduce spending on some specific programs which are not of high priority. All these initiatives, Mr. Speaker, have helped to lower our expenditures. Going forward, Mr. Speaker, we will continue to take bold actions to contain our expenditures further in the next financial year in order to further reduce the deficit. This will entail the following. Mr. Speaker, the public sector wage bill continues to rise, leaving fewer and fewer resources for development. Certainly, this is not a good practice, and no meaningful development can be realized unless we reverse the trend. Mr. Speaker, in order to contain the wage bill, I propose that we limit strictly the extension of services for the significant number of civil servants who are retiring at the age of 60 years. In addition, Mr. Speaker, we will restrict new recruitment to key technical staff, security personnel, teachers, and health workers. Further, Mr. Speaker, a cleansing of the wage bill will be undertaken to root out ghost workers. Government will also fast-track migration away from the current integrated payroll and personnel database system to the IFMIS human resource module to improve payroll management. Mr. Speaker, expenditure on domestic and foreign travel has been growing due to frequent travels. To limit this expenditure, we are exploring the use of a more efficient cost-cutting approach, including use of electronic card system for all public officers traveling within and outside the country. This card would be preloaded with subsistence allowance to be expended by officers traveling on official duty on eligible expenditures only. Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet is considering a new government transport policy that will standardize the institutional framework for fleet management and use of fuel cards across government in order to improve efficiency and cut costs. In addition, the policy will promote local industries by requiring that all government vehicles be procured only from the locally assembled plants. Mr. Speaker, the government has been leasing office space at higher than market rates, resulting in huge costs to government. Beginning 1st July 2019, all procurement of office accommodation by government will be standardized with uniform cost leases, and existing contracts will be renegotiated to ensure a standard rate. Mr. Speaker, we are on course towards providing an electronic end-to-end solution on all procurement processes. Mr. Speaker, this will significantly enhance efficiency, transparency, and accountability in procurement. It will further provide procurement audit trails, enhance reporting and procurement analytics for better monitoring of the public procurement system, efficient and electronic archiving of procurement records, and availability of online appeal and complaint mechanism, among others. Mr. Speaker, we are now in the final stage of issuing the new public procurement and asset disposal regulation to fully operationalize the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act of 2015. Our assessment shows that significant savings can be achieved under framework procurement and the new institutional arrangement for common user items that have been instituted in the new regulations. Mr. Speaker, the pension budget has increased by over threefold in the last 10 years, from 25 billion in 2008-2009 to 86 billion in the current financial year. This is unsustainable. Between February and May this year, we conducted a payroll cleansing exercise for pensioners and dependents at the Huduma centers across the country to authenticate the approximately 270,000 recipients of monthly pension paid by the government. We are finalizing the analysis and we expect cost savings. Pension management will also be improved with migration to IFMIS since last month. Mr. Speaker, to address the challenge of rising pension budget, we have finalized a new national pension policy and public service superannuation scheme. This scheme which will be rolled out in the financial year 2019-2020, will ease the pension burden on the exchequer and free resources for other critical national priorities, while at the same time ensuring that the pension budget remains sustainable. This scheme will allow portability of pension benefits, thus allowing free movement of staff into and out of government. Mr. Speaker, the government will issue public investment management regulations, which will provide a framework for appraising and approving new projects to be funded through government budgets. In order to enhance transparency and accountability, all approved and ongoing projects will be available in the Public Investment Management Information System portal. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the expenditures measures that I have just enumerated, domestic revenue mobilization will be critical to helping us achieve our fiscal deficit targets. I will be coming back later in this budget statement to our proposed taxation measures that will make our tax system more efficient and strengthen our revenues. Meanwhile, in terms of administrative measures to enhance revenue collection and seal revenue loopholes, a number of initiatives are underway, including sustaining the fight against illicit and counterfeit trade that was launched last year. KRA will continue to strengthen and upgrade the ICT system, including the full rollout of the integrated custom management system, which has been delayed for too long. Information sharing through MOUs with other jurisdictions to support fight against cross-border tax evasion will also be implemented. Revenue enhancement initiatives that target, among others, enhanced scanning of containers to detect concealment, implementation of regional electronic cargo tracking system to tackle transit diversion, implementation of new debt collection strategy, resolution of tax dispute, and enhancing investigative capacity to support revenue collection. Mr. Speaker, we expect the above administrative measures to significantly boost our revenue efforts going forward. Mr. Speaker, in the coming financial year, we expect revenue, including A&A, of 2.1 trillion. Expenditure and net lending are projected at 2.8 trillion, leaving a fiscal deficit, including grants, of 6 or 7.8 billion. In relation to GDP, this deficit translates to 5.6%, a decline from 6.8% in this financial year and 7.4% last financial year. Mr. Speaker, the fiscal deficit of 5.6% of GDP will be financed by net external financing of 324 billion and net domestic financing of 283.5 billion. Mr. Speaker, we shall continue to remain on this planned path of reducing the fiscal deficit in the medium term in order to create more fiscal space and to reduce the public debt. Mr. Speaker, resource mobilization through borrowing will be in accordance with the Public Financial Management Act 2012 and guided by the annual medium-term debt management strategy, which this House approves annually, and which seeks to minimize costs and risks on public debt and borrowing. Official development assistance on high concessional terms will be preferred for some of the external financing, while medium to long-term Treasury bonds will remain the primary source for domestic financing. Mr. Speaker, Kenya continues to meet its debt service obligation promptly with no accumulation of debt arrears. Public debt is within sustainable levels and the debt burden is projected to decline over the medium term as we implement the fiscal consolidation plan. Mr. Speaker, the loan proceeds we have contracted primarily from our multilateral and bilateral development partners have been used to finance development expenditures, including in such areas as ports, railway, roads, energy, and water. This infrastructure is critical to the expansion of our potential growth and regional competitiveness in making Kenya the African hub for transportation, industrial, and service sectors. Nevertheless, the borrowed resources must be used wisely. Accordingly, the recently established Public Investment Management Unit will be appraising all infrastructure projects before such projects are committed in the budget in order to establish their value for money, affordability, economic return for the benefit of the current and future generation, in line with our Constitution. Mr. Speaker, we have constituted and strengthened the Public Debt Management Office at the National Treasury under the Director General to be responsible for public debt management and operations. We have initiated a set of reforms to promote development of domestic debt market, an important source of financing for our development program. In particular, Mr. Speaker, we plan to roll out measures to enhance transparency and predictability in the issuance and trading process for Treasury bills and bonds to enhance efficiency, lower costs and risk, as well as develop an effective yield curve for government domestic debt securities. Given the importance of Eurobonds in our debt portfolio, we will strengthen the debt office to adopt modern liability management instruments to reduce cost and settlement risk, in addition to introducing an investor relations unit at the Treasury. Mr. Speaker, county governments in the coming financial year will receive a proposed allocation of 371.6 billion, of which 310 is the equitable share and 61.6 billion will be conditional transfers, including 38.7 billion from our development partners. Mr. Speaker, I am well aware that the proposal I have outlined above on the division of revenue between the national and county government is subject to negotiation under the Joint Mediation Committee established by the two houses of Parliament. We look forward to the speedy conclusion of the mediation process, which we expect will fully take into account the provision of Article 203 of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, in order to encourage the counties to optimize own sources of revenue, the National Treasury, in collaboration with Council of Governors, will implement the national policy to support enhancement of county government own sources of revenue. Further, as per the presidential directive issued in February 2019, the National Treasury has established a multi-agency team to develop and implement an integrated revenue management system for county governments. This initiative is aimed at eliminating the leakages and large costs currently incurred by counties in their revenue collection processes. Mr. Speaker, during this financial year, the County Government Revenue Raising Process Bill 2018 was submitted to the National Assembly. Pursuant to Article 209(5) of the Constitution, this bill aims to regulate the introduction of levies by county governments while ensuring that counties do not prejudice national economic policies, cross-country economic activities, or national mobility of goods, services, capital, and labor. I urge this House to prioritize the enactment of this bill in order to ensure better regulation of the process of introducing new levies by county governments to safeguard the gains made in improving our business climate. Mr. Speaker, we expect counties to manage their finances in a manner that is consistent with the fiscal responsibility principles as set out in the PFM Act 2012 with respect to the development spending allocation and control of expenditure on personnel emolument. Mr. Speaker, we also expect counties to adhere to the policy of clearing pending bills, pursuing austerity measures, and completing ongoing projects before embarking on new ones. Mr. Speaker, let me turn to highlights of the government spending priorities in the coming financial year. Total program spending for 2019-2020 amounts to 2.8 trillion. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency the President has outlined 4 big areas of focus. These are universal health care, affordable housing, increasing manufacturing contribution to GDP, and food and nutritional security. Mr. Speaker, let me outline how the budget speaks to the President's priorities. Ministries, departments, and agencies, while finalizing the expenditure estimates for the next financial year and medium term, were required to align their proposals towards realization of the Big Four plan. In total, I have allocated approximately 450.9 billion to the Big Four plan drivers and their enablers. Mr. Speaker, a healthy population is key in the attainment of socio-economic development. It's for this reason that the government has prioritized universal health coverage. To support UHC, I have allocated 47.8 billion to activities and programs geared towards universal health coverage. Some of the specific intervention in this area include scaling up universal health coverage to the rest of the counties, NHIF cover for the elderly and severely disabled, In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have allocated 7.9 billion from the Sports, Art and Social Development Fund to fund the universal healthcare initiatives. Mr. Speaker, other allocations to improve health service delivery include 2.9 billion for doctors, clinical officers, nurses internship program. Kenya shilling 14.4 billion for Kenyatta National Hospital, 9.2 billion for Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, 2.3 billion for Kenya Medical Research Institute, 7.4 billion for Kenya Medical Training Centers, and 1.2 billion for Health Workers Internship Program. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to stay focused on providing decent and affordable housing for our citizens. To that end, I have allocated 10.5 billion to cater for social housing and construction of affordable housing units, including housing units for the police and Kenya prisons. Included also is 2.3 billion for public servants housing mortgage scheme and 5 billion for the National Housing Development Fund as contributions by government for its employees. Mr. Speaker, with the recent establishment of Kenya Mortgage Refinance Companies by His Excellency the President, Kenyans will now access affordable mortgage loans for purposes of acquiring homes. KMRC has received capital injection of 1 billion from government and 35 billion credit lines from the World Bank and African Development Bank. KMRC also received 1.2 billion from other stakeholders. These are banks and SACCOs, and a further 400 million is expected from development financial institutions, that is IFC and Shelter Afrique, in the form of equity injection. Mr. Speaker, investment in the manufacturing sector is key in transforming Kenya into a middle-income economy. Under the Big Four plan, the goal is to increase its contribution to GDP, create jobs annually, increase FDI, and improve ease of doing business. To support the manufacturing sector, we have scaled up reforms to encourage investment in industrial sheds and parks. The electricity rebate mentioned earlier will also improve competitiveness in the sector. Mr. Speaker, government has completed the revival of one of the oldest textile companies in Kenya, based in Eldoret, Rotich. It is expected to be launched in the coming weeks. Rotich is expected to employ over 3,000 employees when fully operational. In this budget, we have allocated a total of 1.1 billion for the development of textile and leather industrial park, Naivasha Industrial Park, and cotton development subsidy. In addition, we have allocated 1.7 billion to support growth of SMEs in the manufacturing sector and 400 million to constituency industrial development centers and 1 billion to modernize facilities in Kenya Industrial Research and Development Institute, KIRDI. Mr. Speaker, to enhance food and nutrition security and support our farmers, government is reforming its agricultural policies and regulations, as well as subsidies to farmers, with a view to make them efficient and less prone to rent seeking. With unspent funds for this current financial year and proceeds from sale of maize from strategic reserves, the Strategic Food Reserve Trust Fund will have adequate funds to buy food reserves and intervene to support farmers in accessing inputs in a reformed arrangement in the coming financial year. In this budget, I have set aside 2 billion for the National Value Chain Support Program, 3 billion for setting up coffee cherry revolving fund to implement prioritized reforms in the coffee subsector. In the coming financial year, coffee farmers across the country will be able to access cherry advance at a modest interest rate of 3%. Mr. Speaker, in this current financial year, government supported sugar farmers by paying 2.1 billion debt for cane deliveries to public mills. To cater for the outstanding balances, we have provided 700 million. Other provisions include 1 billion for crop diversification and to revitalize the miraa industry, 800 billion for rehabilitation of fish landing sites, and 700 million for smallholder dairy commercialization. I have also allocated a total of 7.9 billion for ongoing irrigation projects. Mr. Speaker, allow me to turn to the proposed expenditure on enablers that are critical to the realization of the Big Four agenda. I'll start with infrastructure. We will continue with the infrastructure program in order to improve our competitiveness. I'm therefore proposing to allocate 180.9 billion for ongoing roads construction projects, as well as rehabilitation and maintenance of roads. We have also provided 55.8 billion for the completion of phase 2A of the SGR, 11 billion for the LAPSET project, and 7.2 billion for the Mombasa Port Development Project. Mr. Speaker, to support generation of adequate and affordable energy, particularly for our manufacturing sector, I have allocated 8.6 billion for the geothermal development, 61.2 billion for power transmission and distribution. This includes 4.5 billion for electrification of public institutions, 5.5 billion for last mile connectivity, and 1.3 billion connectivity subsidy, 1 billion for street lighting, and 1.5 billion for transformers in our constituencies. Mr. Speaker, a safe and secure environment is a precondition for achieving the Big Four agenda. Therefore, I have provided 326.5 billion for security agencies, which include 121.6 billion for defense, that's 7.7 billion for National Intelligence Service, 26.9 billion for Prisons Department, 140 billion for State Department of Interior. The allocation to the State Department of Interior includes 22.8 billion for house allowance for the police and prisons, and 6.9 billion for police and prisons officers' medical scheme. For the police.
All the members.
Mr. Speaker, education continues to receive lion's share of spending as government continues to provide access to basic and higher education, as well as to skills development and training. 55.4 billion is allocated to cater for free day secondary education and 13.4 billion for free primary education. To increase the teacher to student ratio, we have provided 3.2 billion for the recruitment of additional teachers. Other allocations include 1.5 billion for primary and secondary school infrastructure, 10.3 billion for tuition and tool support for vocational training, 6.8 billion for construction and equipping of technical institutions, 4 billion for examination fee waiver for all Class 8 and Form 4 candidates, and 4 billion for NHIF insurance for secondary school students. Mr. Speaker, I have further set aside 97.7 billion to support university education and 12.6 billion to the Higher Education Laws Board. Mr. Speaker, in my budget statement last year, I highlighted some of the measures to improve governance and transparency and accountability of government. Procurement reforms included the requirement of all ministries, departments, and agencies to continually publish and publicize all details of procurement information and contract awards on the Public Procurement Information Portal. Mr. Speaker, this portal was developed and launched. The Public Procurement Regulatory Authority continues to publish monthly contract award by all public entities in the portal. To date, 385 public entities have been registered in the portal and 5,236 contracts published, valued at 146.5 billion. We expect further transparency with the implementation of new end-to-end e-procurement system fully integrated with IFMIS. Mr. Speaker, to sustain the drive against corruption, I have enhanced allocation to the institutions mandated to fight corruption. In addition, in particular, Mr. Speaker, we have allocated 2.9 billion to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, 3 billion to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, 50 billion to the Asset Recovery Agency, 540.8 billion to the 540 million to the Financial Reporting Center, 7.1 billion to the Criminal Investigation Services, and 5.7 billion to the Office of the Auditor General. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, to support the oversight and legislative role of Parliament and access to justice, I have allocated 40.5 billion to Parliament and 19.4 billion to the judiciary. Mr. Speaker, the rapidly developing digital economy provides opportunities to boost our economic growth and create jobs. Therefore, we need to invest more in this area to boost literacy and digital skills. We also need to invest in digital infrastructure and improve access to affordable broadband connectivity. Thus, Mr. Speaker, to support ICT sector and take advantage of the digital divide and consolidate Kenya's leading position in technology space, I have allocated 3.2 billion for the digital literacy program, 2.9 billion for government shared services, 2.8 billion for national optic fiber backbone phase 2 expansion, and 1.1 billion for installation of an internet-based 4,000 network. I have also set aside 7.2 billion for ongoing construction of Konza Technopolis complex and another 5.1 billion to support Konza data center and smart city facilities project. Mr. Speaker, to share the benefit of our growing economy and to relieve the blight of our vulnerable members of our society, we have provided 16.6 billion for cash transfers to the elderly person, 7.9 billion for orphans and vulnerable children, and 1.1 billion for cash transfers to persons with severe disabilities. Also, we have set aside 2.3 billion for the Kenya Anger Safety Net program and 100 million to support those with albinism and 200 million for the National Council for Persons with Disabilities Fund. Mr. Speaker, to support sports, culture, and arts, I have also allocated 5.3 billion from the Sports, Art, and Social Development Fund to support youth, women, and persons living with disabilities in areas such as sports and arts. Mr. Speaker, to promote equitable regional development, we have provided 41.7 billion for the National Government Constituency Development Fund and 2.3 billion for Affirmative Action Fund to promote regional equity and for social development. We expect these funds to augment national government functions, especially school infrastructure, to ease the shortages associated with the 100% transition policy. I have also allocated 5.8 billion for the Equalization Fund to finance programs in the marginalized areas. Mr. Speaker, the rest of my presentation summarizes various tax measures and miscellaneous amendments that I intend to introduce through the Finance Bill 2019 and regulations to realize the objective set out in the Big Four plan. The tax policy measures in this budget are expected to generate an additional 37 billion and tax revenue to the exchequer. Mr. Speaker, the new income tax bill that benefited from extensive public consultation is at the final stage of legal drafting before it's submitted to this House shortly. Accordingly, I will make limited changes to the Income Tax Act to enhance equity and fairness. Mr. Speaker, after 4 years of implementation, there is a need to review the capital gains tax legislation in order to enhance equity and fairness, as well as harmonize the rate with other jurisdictions, including the East African Community region, where the rates ranges from 20 to 30. Consequently, I propose to increase the rate of capital gain tax from 5% to 12.5%. Further, Mr. Speaker, in order to allow for seamless restructuring of corporate entities, I propose to exempt from capital gain tax the transfer of property that is necessitated by restructuring of corporate entities. This measure will allow corporate entities to restructure their operations for efficiency and market penetration. Mr. Speaker, with the increasing demand to mobilize resources, there is need to expand the tax base and enhance our revenue. Over the years, with the expanded economy, there has been an increase in services that are offered on commercial basis, some of which are not within the ambit of withholding tax. I therefore propose to expand the scope of application of withholding tax by subjecting additional services other than management and professional fee to withholding tax. Mr. Speaker, these services include security services, cleaning and fumigation services, catering services offered outside hotel premises, transportation of goods excluding air transport services, sales, promotion and marketing and advertising services. These measures will enhance tax compliance by persons offering these services. Mr. Speaker, the Kenya economy and the world economy at large is fast changing to keep up with technological advancement. In particular, the digital economy is fast evolving, thereby posing challenges to taxation. This, Mr. Speaker, is due to the unparalleled reliance on intangibles and massive use of data and widespread adoption of multi-sided business models and the difficulty of determining the jurisdiction in which value creation occurs. This has led to erosion of our tax base, hence low tax revenue, since the existing system is not equipped to deal with these emerging challenges. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed a raft of tax measures that are aimed at providing the platform of taxation of income generated from digital economy so as to boost our revenue for inclusive economic development. Mr. Speaker, in my budget statement last year, I had indicated that the draft income tax bill 2018 would be submitted to Parliament for enactment. The bill is at advanced stage of legal drafting, and I will soon be submitting the same to this House. This bill will modernize our income tax legislation so as to boost revenue collection. Mr. Speaker, the VAT Act provides for refund of tax where the income tax exceeds the output tax for taxable supplies and full input tax attributed to zero-rated supplies. In 2017, the VAT regulations introduced a formula for determination of the amount of refund payable to taxpayers who supply both zero-rated and standard-rated supplies. However, the application of the formula is adversely affecting exporters, as they are not able to fully recover the excess input tax relating to zero-rated supplies. To address this, I propose to adjust the VAT refund formula in order to ensure that these taxpayers are able to fully recover the portion of input tax relating to zero-rated supplies. This measure will boost Kenya's exports and make them competitive in the international market. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the value-added withholding tax system has been in operation for some time now. However, the implementation of the system has encountered challenges, the major one being a build-up of huge credits, yet the law does not provide for refund of the same to the taxpayers. Mr. Speaker, in order to address this challenge, I propose to reduce the rate of VAT withholding from 6% to 2%. This will not only help reduce the build-up of VAT refunds, but will also help enhance the cash flow of our businesses, community, and stimulate economic activities and job creation. Mr. Speaker, Kenya is positioning itself as a leading assembler of electronics and computers within the region. This development initiative will transform Kenya into a major manufacturer and supplier of electronics and computers in the East African community. Mr. Speaker, in order to encourage the growth of this sector, I propose to exempt from VAT locally manufactured motherboards and all inputs used in their manufacture. This will make them more competitive against imported motherboards. Mr. Speaker, the government has made tremendous effort in protecting our environment. The country has banned the use of plastic bags to reduce pollution and provide clean environment to its citizens. However, other forms of plastic waste remain a major cause of both land and water pollution. Mr. Speaker, to address this challenge, there is need to promote plastic waste management by encouraging recycling of plastic waste. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I propose to exempt from VAT all services offered to plastic recycling plants and supply of machinery and equipment used in the construction of these plants. Further, to encourage investment in plastic recycling, I propose to lower corporation tax to 15% for the first 5 years for any investor operating a plastic recycling plant. Mr. Speaker, on matters relating to customs, I have proposed measures intended to make our products more competitive while at the same time protect local industries from unfair competition. This will support the manufacturing sector under the Big Four plan, which is expected to grow to 15% of GDP by 2022. Mr. Speaker, the details of the custom measures will be communicated through the East African Community Gazette and will be effective 1st July this year. I wish to highlight a few of them. Mr. Speaker, our metal and allied sector continues to face stiff competition from imported cheap and subsidized iron and steel products. In order to protect this industry, I have retained the ad valorem rate of import duty at 25%, with corresponding specific rates of duty within a wide range of these products which are produced in the region. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has sufficient capacity to produce some paper and paperboard products, and therefore there is need to protect these industries. However, the common external tariff on this product is 10%. To protect manufacturers of these products from unfair external competition, I have proposed that the import duty rate, which was increased last year to 25% for 1 year period, be maintained for a further 1 year period. Mr. Speaker, as you may be aware, the government banned the logging of trees to stop deforestation. However, our manufacturers who use raw timber to manufacture furniture and other products are affected by this measure, as they now lack adequate supply of raw timber. To address their blight and at the same time protect our forests, I have proposed to reduce import duty on raw timber from 10% to 0%. In addition, Mr. Speaker, to protect the timber and furniture industry from proliferation of cheap finished timber products and to encourage local production, I propose to retain an ad valorem rate of import duty at 25%, with corresponding specific rate of import duty on the products. Mr. Speaker, betting has become widespread in our society, and its expansion has had negative social effects, particularly to the young and vulnerable members of our society. In order to curtail the negative effect arising from betting activities, I propose to introduce excise duty on betting activities at 10% at the amount staked. Mr. Speaker, you'll have an opportunity to look at that. Mr. Speaker, although currently there is low uptake of electric-powered motor vehicles in the country, green energy technology is being embraced in many countries due to environmental benefits and renewability. Kenya too needs to promote the use of this clean type of energy in line with the Sustainable Development Goal number 7, which can be achieved through lowering and cost of these vehicles through tax incentive. Mr. Speaker, this will encourage uptake of these vehicles as well as encourage investment in area of the technology. Further, it will support the policy on green energy, thereby reducing carbon emission. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I propose to reduce excise duty on motor vehicles that are fully powered by electricity to 10%. Mr. Speaker, excise revenue has declined from approximately 3% of GDP in 2003-2004 to 2% in 2017-2018. The law currently provides for an annual inflation adjustment for excisable goods that have a specific rate. The adjustment was done last year, and the rates of excise duty on these goods were increased by 5.2%. Mr. Speaker, although the rates will be adjusted again in July by inflation rate provided by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, the adjustment may not be adequate to address the declining trend of excise revenue. Mr. Speaker, in order to address this decline and to boost excise revenue, I propose to increase the rate of excise duty on cigarettes, wines, and spirits by 15%. In other words, Mr. Speaker, excise duty on alcohol and tobacco will be increased as follows. A 750 ml bottle of wine will have an excise duty of 136 shillings, which is 18 shillings more from the current rates. The duty of a bottle of whiskey,
All the members, even if you are excited or affected.
The duty of a bottle of whiskey will go up by 24 shillings to Kenya shilling 182 for a 750 ml bottle. The excise duty of a packet of 20 cigarettes will increase by 8 shillings to 61 shillings per packet. Mr. Speaker, the government introduced the growth and the enterprise market segment with favorable listing conditions for SME to raise finance from the capital markets for growth. However, the uptake has not been good in view of the potential back taxes that the enterprises may be facing. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I propose to introduce amnesty on the tax penalties and interest on any outstanding tax for 2 years period to the listing for SMEs that list under the GEMS program to encourage them to list and clear their tax records. The principal tax shall, however, be fully paid. Mr. Speaker, the government is keen to position Kenya as a prime financial center in East and Central Africa. The first step to achieve this is to make our financial services accessible to both Kenyans and our visitors. Currently, Mr. Speaker, the law requires one to have KRA PIN before opening bank account. This poses challenges to visiting foreigners, privileged persons, and foreign investors investing in our financial market. In this regard, I propose to amend the Tax Procedure Act to empower the Commissioner to grant exemptions from the PIN requirement in certain circumstances when opening a bank account. Mr. Speaker, last year, through the Finance Act 2018, I introduced an anti-adulteration levy on illuminating kerosene in order to check the menace of adulteration of fuel. In addition to reducing the adulteration of fuel products, this levy increased the cost to manufacturers of paint and resin who use illuminating kerosene as input. In order to address this problem, Mr. Speaker, I propose to introduce a provision under Miscellaneous Fee and Levies Act 2016 that will allow manufacturers of paint and resin to get refund on the levy paid. Mr. Speaker, in order to further cushion our local manufacturers and facilitate the growth of the sectors, I propose to reduce the import declaration fee, IDF, on intermediate goods and raw materials used by manufacturers from 2% to 1.5%, while increasing the rate on finished goods from 2% to 3.5%. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I propose to raise the railway development levy for finished products from 1.5% to 2% to further cushion our manufacturers. Mr. Speaker, raw hides and skins are currently subject to export levy. This measure has had a significant impact in increasing value addition in the sector. However, the levy does not apply to tanned and crushed hides and skins, which are also being exported at the expense of value addition. Mr. Speaker, in order to further accelerate value addition and promote the manufacturing of local leather products, I propose to impose export levy on tanned and crushed hides and skins at 10%. Mr. Speaker, the Capital Markets Authority is responsible for promoting, regulating, and facilitating the development of an orderly, fair, and efficient capital markets in Kenya. In order to effectively deliver on this mandate, the authority requires powers to sanction the players in the market in case of default. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed amendments to the Capital Markets Act to empower the authority to enforce penalties and sanctions on market players who violate laid down rules and procedures. Mr. Speaker, Policyholders Compensation Fund was established to cushion holders of insurance policies in the event that insurance companies are unable to discharge their services. However, Mr. Speaker, the fund has not been utilized since establishment in 2004, despite 4 insurers going under statutory management. This is because the current provision of the law only allows compensation to claimants of an insolvent insurer. To address these challenges, I have proposed amendments to the Insurance Act and the regulations to bring clarity and enable the fund to be utilized to compensate claimants. Mr. Speaker, border transport has become an important sector in our economy. It is one of the largest employers of our youth and also provides cheap and convenient transport for Kenya. Despite the above benefits, Mr. Speaker, this mode of transport has proven to be very risky to riders, passengers, and even pedestrians. Further, Mr. Speaker, there are accident victims who are mostly from the lower cadre of our society are left to seek financial assistance for treatment from friends and relatives since these borders are not insured. In order to mitigate against this risk, Mr. Speaker, I propose to amend the Insurance Motor Vehicle Third-Party Risk Certificate of Insurance rules to require all passengers carrying borders and tuk-tuks to have an insurance cover for passengers and pedestrians. Mr. Speaker, retirement benefit schemes that invest in the guaranteed funds are subject to unfavorable terms of exit. In particular, the schemes are required to withdraw funds in installment spread over 3 years, otherwise they suffer a charge of 25% of the fund value. This exposes members to low returns on the fund balances.
On the members,
you
will have your time to discuss.
Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed to amend the Retirement Benefit Act to reduce the period of transfer to 1 year so as to allow members to access better returns. Mr. Speaker, while both individual and occupational regulations under the Retirement Benefit Act make provisions for creation of reserve funds in the defined contribution schemes, the schemes are not required to make provisions for distribution of reserve fund in the rules. This has made some members exit without accessing their entitlement to the reserve fund. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I propose to amend the occupational pension regulations and retirement benefits regulations to ensure that the existing members receive their equitable share of the reserve fund. Mr. Speaker, last year I introduced amendments to allow contribution for post-retirement medical funds in the occupational and individual retirement benefit scheme. This was meant to enable members of these schemes to contribute for a medical scheme to be assessed after retirement as a form of social security. In order to ensure that many Kenyans enjoy this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, I propose to further amend the Umbrella Retirement Scheme regulations to allow members of the Umbrella Retirement Benefit Scheme to contribute towards post-retirement medical funds. This will also contribute to the achievement of universal health coverage. Mr. Speaker, in order to establish a legal framework for the operations of the National Electronic Single Window System, I will soon submit the National Electronic Single Window Bill 2019 for deliberation by the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, the bill proposes to legislate the use of the National Single Window System as well as to re-establish the Kenya Trade Network Agency. In addition, the bill will also seek to amend various statutes to recognize and formalize the issuance of electronic certificate permits that are currently issued by various agencies through the system. Mr. Speaker, the aim of the interest rate capping introduced in September 2016 was to reduce the cost of borrowing, increase access to credit, and higher return to savings. It's now going to 3 years, and the law has had the opposite effect, with micro, small, medium enterprises starved of credit and the loan books of small banks becoming smaller. Mr. Speaker, you will recall in the Finance Bill 2018, I proposed to amend the Banking Amendment Act 2016 by repealing Section 33B of the Act. The proposal was motivated by the need to enhance access to credit and minimize the adverse impact of interest rate capping on credit while strengthening financial access and monetary policy effectiveness. In addition, I highlighted a number of reforms that we are putting in place to optimize lending to the private sector while at the same time encouraging innovation in the financial sector in Kenya. Already, the Central Bank of Kenya is dealing with the consumer protection issues in the banking sector. Mr. Speaker, given the challenges that the micro, small, and medium enterprises are facing in accessing credit from the banking sector, and cautious of the need to spur business activity, I am in this year's finance bill proposing a repeal of Section 33B of the Banking Act 2016. I'm convinced this will unlock credit to the private sector and in particular to the SMEs. Further, Mr. Speaker, we will be launching an SME credit guarantee scheme in a few weeks' time to deepen access to credit by SMEs without being subjected to complex application procedures and collateral requirements. These, together with the Biashara Kenya Fund and SME Fund, will address the very reason why interest rate caps were introduced. Mr. Speaker, the aforementioned reforms will not only address shortcomings in the credit market, but also catalyze provision of credit to support the government Big Four agenda. Mr. Speaker, the budget is also about insulating ourselves against future risk and sustaining our long-term development agenda. Mr. Speaker, the funds allocated in the budget for infrastructure development are not adequate to meet the growing needs for quality and sustainable services and to support the Big Four plan. In this respect, the government will continue to leverage on the private sector to support infrastructure development through public-private partnership arrangement. Mr. Speaker, we have already made great strides in this area and have awarded the Nairobi-Nakuru Mau Summit Toll Road project and approved the development of JKIA James Gishuru Nairobi Expressway project to be done under the PPP framework. These projects are expected to commence soon and will significantly reduce traffic in Nairobi City and on the Nairobi-Nakuru highway. Mr. Speaker, as the host nation of the United Nations Environment Programme, Kenya remains a global leader in environmental conservation and sustainable development. Mr. Speaker, we have continued to champion the green economy by aspiring industrial growth in a manner that protects the environment from the effects of climate change. We have also committed to expand our forest cover from 7.2% to 10% target. Mr. Speaker, building on our commitment to foster a sustainable environment, we have issued another ban on single-use plastics in all our protected areas, including national parks, beaches, forests, and conservation areas. The ban shall be effective 5th June 2020. Mr. Speaker, as reiterated by His Excellency the President during his State of Nation address in April this year, our resolve to sustainably manage our natural resources remain unwavering. Mr. Speaker, this is a new sector in our economy. We shall soon export crude oil to establish its commercial viability. In addition, the National Intelligence Service, working with the Department of Defense, is conducting geophysical survey to map out the natural resources across the country. In order to prepare for that, we have finalized the Kenya Sovereign Wealth Fund Bill, which is undergoing legal drafting before submission to Parliament for approval. Mr. Speaker, among other things, the Sovereign Wealth Fund Bill proposes the creation of a fund and provides a legal framework to guide the investment of revenue from oil, gas, and mineral resources. It's also important to underscore that other than the cost of managing the fund, all monies in the fund will be used to finance critical development programs, build savings for future generation in order to ensure intergenerational equity and for stability and for stabilizing budget expenditures in the event of fluctuation in the price of natural resources. Mr. Speaker, the government has eased service delivery to the public through digitalization of critical services in the e-citizen portal. We have e-registry and we are digitalizing land transactions, business registration, motor vehicles and driver's license services, and services under the registration of persons, including passports. As a result of the ICT penetration, Mr. Speaker, Kenya has been ranked 7th in Africa in e-commerce uptake and 85 globally in the United Nations Conference and Trade Development UNCTAD Business to Consumer E-commerce Index. Mr. Speaker, in May 2019, His Excellency the President launched Kenya Digital Economy Blueprint for Africa in Kigali in Rwanda. The blueprint serves as one of Kenya's contribution to Smart Africa Alliance in its role as champion for the digital economy within the alliance and proponent of the African-wide digital economy. Mr. Speaker, the adoption of digital economy framework offers us an opportunity to leapfrog and join nations in the first world and actively contribute to the global economy. Mr. Speaker, the government will continue with its initiative to recapitalize and restructure the banks that are partially or wholly owned by government, with a view to creating stronger banks and development financial institutions. In this regard, the government, as shareholders in supporting the merger of the National Bank and Kenya Commercial Bank, that will result in creation of one of the strongest banks in East Africa. In addition, the merger of Tourism Finance Corporation, IDB Capital, and ICDC to form Kenya Development Bank with the right capacity to support industrial growth of the country by providing long-term development financing. Mr. Speaker, you will recall that His Excellency the President appointed a task force in November 2018 to review our sugar industry with a view to addressing the challenges in the sector. The government will implement the recommendation from the task force and in the meantime pay all outstanding debts owed by sugar farmers. Mr. Speaker, university reforms are critical at this stage. We shall review all universities' public financial and management system, appraise ongoing projects with a view to restructure them, and implement radical measures that will include merger or closure of some universities and universities' campuses that are not able to sustain their operations against the number of students admitted or degree course offered. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the government under the leadership of His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta has steered our economy to become the largest and most diverse in the region. Mr. Speaker, we should be proud of this and be ready to guard and further promote our growth and development. Mr. Speaker, the budget I have presented today has undergone a vigorous preparation process in which we had to make tough decisions in the quest to move our country forward. Faced with limited resources, we have had to make tough choices to cut low-priority expenditures. I firmly believe that if we all embrace and support the measures spelled out in this budget, we shall create more jobs and transform the lives of Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, this budget takes into account the socio-economic status of our people and their desire for better livelihood and quality of their lives. In summary, Mr. Speaker, this budget responds to the concerns of Kenyans, which include high cost of living, unemployment, poverty, and income inequality, lays a firm foundation for economic transformation and renewal, aligned resources to Big Four, while sustaining allocation to critical infrastructure, as well as proper spending in health, education, and social safety nets, and provide support to youth and growth of SMEs. Mr. Speaker, the actualization of our development goals in the past has largely been driven by Kenya's spirit of peace, hard work, unity of purpose, and national cohesion. Mr. Speaker, these values remain critical for our growth and development. I therefore urge all Kenyans to nurture and promote peace and unity of purpose as